I'd been doing my Sunday laundry at the same 24-hour wash and spin in Burbank for almost 2 years. One Sunday at 10:15 p.m., a man walked in. Empty hamper, no laundry bag. He sat at the folding table next to mine. He had no clothes to fold. He watched my dryer cycle through the entire load. When my dryer beeped, he stood up and waited at the dryer door. Not aggressive, just present. The Burbank Police Department arrested him 5 days later. He had a prior pattern of doing this at 3 other LA area 24-hour businesses. I'm Aaliyah, 27, ICU nurse at Providence St. Joseph in Burbank. My shift schedule meant Sunday evenings were laundry night. I'd grab an in-and-out double-double on the way over from the hospital because the cafeteria food was punishing and the 4-block walk gave the burger time to cool. Honestly, the routine was built around the wash and spin's hours and lighting. 24 hours, fluorescent, 2 cameras at the front, and 1 at the change machine. I had picked it after asking the security manager at my building, which 24-hour businesses in the neighborhood had the strongest camera coverage. I had built my routine around what I had assumed was a safe choice. The man in question came in carrying an empty hamper. That was the first thing I noticed. An empty hamper is something you bring to take laundry home, not to do laundry. I assumed he had loaded his clothes earlier, maybe was using one of the backwashers and had carried in the empty hamper for collection. I went back to my own folding. He did not go to a washer. He did not check the dryers in the back. He walked directly to the folding table next to mine and sat down. He set the empty hamper on the floor next to his feet. He had nothing else with him. I want to walk through what I clocked next slowly. By the time I cataloged the second oddity, I had already started running through my response options. I mean, you triage like that every day in an ICU? You're trained to clock 4 anomalies and prioritize before anyone speaks. He pulled out his phone and held it face down on the table. He did not look at the phone. He looked at the folding table. He looked at me when I was looking down. He looked away when I was looking up. The cross-check that had worked at the library, Quinn, the SDSU student, told me later, when we connected at a campus safety panel, this was the exact same pattern, was unmistakable. My dryer was about 15 minutes from finishing. I made a decision in about 8 seconds. I would not stay until the dryer finished if he was still there. I would walk out and come back the next morning to retrieve the load, paying the small late pickup fee. I picked up my phone. I opened the Wash and Spin app, which has a feature for Laundromat alerts. The app's home screen has an emergency button that pings the chain's regional security center. I tucked my phone screen down in my lap. His dryer that he was not using beeped. He did not stand up. My dryer was still going. He waited. I stood up at 5 minutes before the dryer's expected finish. I left my folding pile on the table. I walked toward the change machine, which has the emergency call box mounted on the wall above it. I hit the call box's red button. The call box pings the corporate security dispatch. The man at the folding table turned his head to track me as I crossed the floor. He did not stand up. Corporate dispatch answered through the call box speaker. Calm, immediate. I said, quietly, that there was a man in the laundromat watching me, that he had no laundry, that I was uncomfortable and would appreciate Burbank PD presence. Dispatch said a unit was being routed. I stayed at the change machine. The man at the folding table watched me but did not move. Burbank PD arrived in 7 minutes. The man stood up when the cruiser pulled into the parking lot through the front window. He walked toward the door. The officers came in. They asked him to stop. They asked him for ID. He gave it. They asked him what laundry he was doing. He said he had finished it. The officers checked the washer logs against his ID. No rental match for that night. He was detained for questioning. Burbank PD pulled 5 days of cameras. The same man had been on the laundromat cameras the previous 3 Sundays at the same hour. He had never run a washer. He had carried an empty hamper in each time. He had sat at folding tables near female customers each time. He had a prior 3 arrests at LA area 24-hour businesses for similar pattern. 2 community college student union pavilions had also reported him during 24-hour finals week openings. He was charged with stalking, criminal trespass, and carrying a concealed weapon. He had a folding razor in his back pocket the officers found at booking. He pleaded 9 months county jail. plus 3 years probation, plus a lifetime ban from the 4-County Laundromat Association. Burbank PD also informed me during a follow-up 2 weeks after his arrest. The man's apartment building had had 3 other tenants in the prior 2 years. They had reported what they described as a feeling of being watched in their own units. The officers had been unable to confirm whether the man had been involved. The building's hallway cameras had not captured anything corroborative. The officers told me the 3 tenants would be receiving notification letters from the precinct, identifying that an individual living in their building had been arrested on a stalking and concealed weapon charge. The letters would not name the man specifically per privacy rules, but they would identify the apartment number, which was enough for residents to figure out who. The Burbank PD detective who handled the indictment debrief told me one detail, one that did not enter into the formal charging, but that he wanted me to know. The folding razor in the man's back pocket had been a kind of razor used in tile cutting work, not a personal grooming razor, not a self-defense knife, a tile razor. The detective said the type of blade had been entered into evidence, with a note from the lab. It was the kind that workers in construction sometimes carried out of habit, but the man had no record of construction employment. He had purchased the razor at a hardware store 6 weeks earlier. That purchase had been pulled from his credit card records during the investigation. The detective did not speculate on what the razor had been for. He said only that he had wanted me to have the full inventory of items the man had been carrying that night, in case I ever testified or wrote about the case. I switched to a laundromat service drop-off the next week. They pick up, wash, dry, fold, deliver. I carry pepper spray in my coat pocket. I do not go to 24-hour businesses alone after 10 p.m. anymore. What lingers in my head is the empty hamper. He had calibrated his disguise to fit the visual pattern of a laundromat customer, the same way the man at Quinn's library had used a coffee cup. The hamper had been the prop. I had taken 3 Sundays to notice the pattern. I do not know how many Sundays he had spent watching me before I noticed.
I was closing the front counter at our family laundromat in Sunrise, Florida, around 11:50 on a Friday night. The last customer walked up, a man at washer 22 in the back row. Gray cap, navy windbreaker, single small towel, and a plastic grocery bag. He asked me to let him into the backroom storage. I'd been doing the closing shift at that location for 8 years. My wife's family business, 3 locations, all 24-hour. This one the biggest. The customer at washer 22 had been there 45 minutes with what looked like a single small towel. A towel cycle is 30 minutes max. He had run it once and then started it again with the same towel. Call me Brown, 38, contractor by day, closing shift attendant at our family's Sunrise Laundromat by night. My wife's family had owned the location for 22 years. My father-in-law had built the backroom storage. My mother-in-law had laid the tile in the front. The thing is, my father-in-law had retired from a Cracker Barrel kitchen management job in '02 and bought the laundromat with his pension. The family had been running it as a side income ever since. Every Friday I closed the counter and locked up at midnight. I knew the rhythm. The man at washer 22 had paid cash. We have a coin and card hybrid system. Cash payers don't show up on our digital records. I had registered him at his entry. Gray cap, navy windbreaker, the towel, and a plastic grocery bag. Because I always note the people in the laundromat past 11. They're the ones who'll typically still be there at closing. I had not thought much of him at the time. At 11:40, I went around, back to do the last fold table sweep. He was still at his washer, the same towel. The display said cycle 2, 15 minutes remaining. I went back to the front counter and started wiping down. At 11:50, he came up to the counter. He was holding the wet towel in a plastic bag in one hand. He asked me, very politely, if I would let him into the backroom storage area to check if his shirt had fallen behind one of the machines. He gestured at the back. He said he had heard something fall when he had put the towel in initially. I told him no. Our policy is no customer access to the backroom storage at any hour. He pressed, said it would only take a minute. I told him no again. I said if he believed he had lost something, I would file an incident report and the morning crew would check the area at 6 a.m. He could come back then. He pulled a knife out of his back pocket. What I did next, I have replayed against the camera footage many times, looking for any moment I could have misread. Honestly, I rehearsed it so many times, and the days after that, the version in my head and the version on the cameras are the same one now. I did not move from behind the counter. I kept the counter between us. I put my left hand on the under-counter ledge. There is a silent alarm button mounted under the lip of the counter. My father-in-law installed it 19 years ago. We had not used it since. I pressed it. The alarm pings Broward Sheriff's Office dispatched directly through a hardwired line. The button does not make a sound at the counter. I did not look at my hand. I kept eye contact with the man with the knife. I asked him calmly what he wanted. He said he was going to the back. I said the counter was in the way and the back room door was on a deadbolt. I did not have a key for it that hour. A lie. The back room door is a standard interior door, but the deadbolt key is on my keyring. I had it in my pocket. I had decided in advance that I would not give him a way to get behind me. He walked around the counter toward me. I stepped right. He stepped right. I kept the counter at my hip. He raised the knife. The front door alarm chimed. A Broward Sheriff's deputy walked in. He had been the closest cruiser to the silent alarm ping, less than 4 minutes from our location. The man with the knife turned. He saw the deputy. He ran toward the back of the laundromat. A second deputy entered from the back through the alley door. The laundromat's back door is unlocked from the alley side, but you have to know the place to find it. Sunrise Police had been working the area for the prior month, following a similar incident at a different Sunrise business. The alley response was second nature for them. The man with the knife was caught between the two deputies in the back row. He dropped the knife. He was detained. His record: 2 prior felony convictions, including one for sexual assault 5 years earlier. He was a registered sex offender who had violated his registry by living within 1,500 feet of an elementary school 3 blocks from our laundromat. He was charged with felony aggravated assault, criminal threats, carrying a concealed weapon, and the sex offender registry violation. He was held without bond, convicted at trial, 8 years state prison, lifetime sex offender registry, this time with active enforcement, lifetime ban from any Broward County business. The deputies who had responded that night both came back later in the week to take secondary statements. They asked me about the timeline of the man's behavior across the 45 minutes he had been in the laundromat. They asked about his vehicle. They asked whether he had been there on prior nights. I told them I did not recognize him, but I would check the security cameras across the prior month. We pulled the cameras together. The deputies found him on our cameras on 5 prior occasions over the previous 3 months. Always on Fridays. Always between 11 and midnight. Always carrying a single grocery bag prop with a single garment. He had been running our chain through 3 different locations as a calibration cycle. He had been measuring which of our closers was alone at the counter and which was paired with a partner. The Friday closer at one of our other locations had been a male relative of mine who weighed 220 pounds. He had not approached that closer. He had approached me. During discovery, the prosecutor disclosed the suspect's vehicle. It had been parked in the strip mall behind our laundromat, not in our lot. The back parking access from the alley had been the way he had planned to leave. The vehicle had contained, in the trunk, rope, a roll of duct tape, contractor garbage bags, and a folded blue tarp. The prosecutor's office told me, during a sentencing prep meeting, that the trunk inventory was being entered as supporting evidence for the attempted kidnap enhancement at sentencing. The defense had argued the trunk items were unrelated to the laundromat incident. The judge accepted the prosecution's position. The 8-year sentence reflected the totality. I have thought about the trunk many times since. I do not know what the tarp had been for. I have a guess. I do not say the guess out loud. My in-laws installed bulletproof glass partitions at the front counter the following month. We hired a second night shift employee, a retired Sunrise PD officer my father-in-law had known for 30 years. I stopped doing the closing shifts. I do contracting during the day, and I am home with my kids at night. I started therapy 3 months in. What I can't shake from that night is the towel. He had carried in a single small towel in a grocery bag to make it past my entry knot as a customer. He had not been a customer. He had been waiting for the closing time when I would be alone behind the counter. He had built the prop like the others. The towel was the disguise. It took me 3 weeks to notice. The Tuesday regular had stopped bringing laundry. Lexington coin op every Tuesday for 3 years post-clinic shift, 9:30 p.m. Quiet place, 6 washers in a row. Fluorescent lights, a vending machine in the corner. I knew the other regulars by face. A retired postal worker, a woman who worked at the bourbon distillery, a younger guy at vet school. Then the 5th Tuesday. The new male regular, the one who never brought laundry, sat down at the folding station, 8 feet from my washer, and watched me. I'm Cole 41, small animal veterinarian in Lexington. Born and raised in Owensboro, moved up here for vet school at UK. Never left. I had moved my practice 4 years ago and bought a house in a part of town. The rental I was in for the first year didn't have laundry hookups. The coin op had been the closest. Honestly, my Tuesday night ritual had built itself. Clinic close at 9. Waffle House takeout if I'd worked through dinner. Coin op by 9:30. Sweet tea from the vending machine on the way out. By the time I bought my house, I had a Tuesday night ritual at the place. Even after I had laundry hookups installed eventually, I had been the kind of person who stayed with the routine. I kept going to the coin op. The first 4 Tuesdays I had noticed the new regular. I had not made anything of it. Mid-30s, dark jacket, jeans, baseball cap. He came in around the same time I did. He sat at the folding station, usually in different chairs, and watched the laundromat traffic. He did not bring laundry. I had assumed he was waiting for someone, like a partner or roommate, who was doing laundry in another area. The coin op has a small annex room at the back, where the larger commercial machines are. People sometimes wait at the folding station, while a partner uses the annex. On the 5th Tuesday, I clocked the pattern. He sat down 8 feet from my washer. I was the only person in the main room. The annex was empty. I had walked past it on the way in. He had no partner doing laundry. He was watching me. I moved to a different washer 2 rows down, farther from the folding station, closer to the front door. He watched me move. He stood up. He moved to a folding table closer to my new washer. I want to pause here because I am a 41-year-old man, and the cultural script for what I felt, feeling watched, feeling like a target, is mostly written for women. I mean, you know it about the rest of the world, but you don't know it about yourself. Not until the pattern lands in your own corner of fluorescent light. I had not had a framework for what I was experiencing. I had only had the pattern recognition that this man was tracking my position in the room. The pattern recognition was clean. The framework was not. I finished my load. I packed up. I walked to my car. As I walked, I pulled my phone out and photographed his license plate through the front window of the laundromat. His vehicle was parked in the lot under a working light. I took the photo. I drove home. I did not sleep well. The next morning, I went to Lexington PD and filed a report. I gave them the photo. I gave them the dates. I remembered from the prior 4 Tuesdays. They were professional. They took it seriously. The investigating officer told me, in a careful voice, single male targets of regular watcher patterns are underreported because most male targets do not recognize the pattern until much later than female targets do. Most male targets only report after the pattern escalates to direct contact or a property crime. 11 days later, he was arrested. DMV matched to the license plate. He had a prior Peeping Tom protective order from 2022 against him in Fayette County. That order had specifically barred him from entering laundromats, gym locker rooms, and other facilities where adults change clothes. The 2022 case had not gone to felony charges because the original victim had moved out of state. The 2022 protective order had been pre-existing and active. He was charged with stalking, criminal trespass, carrying a concealed weapon, a folding box cutter in his car, and violation of the pre-existing Peeping Tom protective order. The protective order violation was the enhancement that bumped the charges to felonies. He pleaded 14 months county jail, plus 4 years supervised release, plus a lifetime ban from all Lexington area laundromats and gym facilities. The DA's office gave me one more piece of information after sentencing. The man's vehicle, when pulled into evidence, had been a 2015 Subaru with a small toolbox in the back seat. The toolbox had contained a digital camera with a small extender lens, a roll of black duct tape, gloves, and a binder. The binder had 11 pages. Each page had a different Lexington area laundromat name at the top, with notes underneath about layout, hours, lighting, and which nights had the heaviest single male customer traffic. My laundromat had been on page 3. My Tuesday evening pattern had been written down in detail. The row of washers I tended to use, the dryer I tended to use, the time I tended to leave. He had been preparing for what the DA called predatory voyeurism, with planned escalation. The 11 laundromats represented his observations set across approximately 10 months. The DA said the binder had been entered as evidence for the protective order violation enhancement. I installed a washer and dryer in my house. $2,200 I had been putting off for 2 years. I shifted my workout to early morning solo runs at home rather than the gym I had been going to. I carry pepper spray. I changed my clinic closeout routine. Staff has a buddy walk to the parking lot now, 2 of us at a time, regardless of the hour. I added a security camera at the back door of the practice. Pings to my phone if anyone enters after 7 p.m. What I keep wrestling with is the framework. I am a 41-year-old male veterinarian. The man following me was not interested in robbing me. The 2022 protective order had been about voyeurism patterns. The officer who took me through the investigation findings said, gently, that single male targets of voyeurism patterns are about as common as the news framework would suggest is rare. But the news framework was wrong. He said it more carefully than that. He said the pattern recognition I had used was the same pattern recognition a female target would use, and that recognizing it was the part that mattered. I have since then talked about this case in 2 public safety contexts, once on a panel for veterinary professional development on safety and solo practices, and once on a Lexington community radio show about underrepresented victimology categories. The community radio show producer told me afterwards they had heard from 4 other male callers. Each had recognized variations of the same pattern in their own lives. After listening, none of those callers had ever reported. The pattern is more common than the news framework treats it as. I do not think I would have ever framed what happened to me as a stalking case if the officer at Lexington PD had not used that word first, gently, on the morning I filed.
Friday night, 10:30, the Independence Plaza Laundromat in Independence, Missouri. 24 washers and 12 dryers, fluorescent strip, half a block from the post office, populated as it always was on Friday nights until the metro closed at midnight. I was at my regular folding table. A man at a corner washer caught my attention. In the 45 minutes he had been there, he had loaded the same single garment into the same washer cycle 3 times. You can call me Devika. 32, local paper journalist. I had moved to Independence from Kansas City 4 years earlier when the paper had given me the Metro beat, covering city council, school board, the I-70 corridor business stories nobody else wanted. The thing is, Independence has its own rhythm. Strip mall economy, a Denny's off the highway, post office still pulling in foot traffic at 9 on a Friday. Friday evenings, I did my laundry. Friday mornings, I usually had my Saturday edition copy filed, and the rest of the day was free. The Plaza Laundromat had been my Friday for 48 months, give or take a few skipped weeks. The man at the corner washer had been there since 10. He had loaded what looked like a single shirt, run the cycle for about 10 minutes, opened the washer, taken the shirt out, looked at it, put it back in, started another cycle. He did this 3 times across the 45 minutes. The shirt was not getting cleaner. He was looking at me each time he opened the washer door. I want to be precise about what I noticed next because everything that followed depended on my noticing. Honestly, the noticing came from years of newsroom interviews. You learn to register inconsistencies fast or you get rolled in your reporting. He stopped going through the wash and look pattern. He stood up. He walked from his corner washer across the laundromat floor toward my folding table. He was in his mid-30s, tall, empty hands except for what looked like a flashlight in his right hand at his side. He stopped about 3 feet from my folding table. He asked, with a smile that did not reach his eyes, whether I could use some help carrying my laundry to my car when I was done. I said no, thank you, I was fine, and I would prefer he go back to his own washer. I said this in the firm tone I had practiced in the newsroom for hostile interviews. He stayed where he was for about 2 seconds. Then he turned and walked back toward the corner washer. He did not sit. He stood next to it watching me. I packed my folding pile faster than I would have otherwise. I picked up my basket. I walked toward the front door of the laundromat. I had not yet finished folding, but I made the decision in the moment that I would finish in my car. He intercepted me halfway across the floor. He grabbed my left arm above the elbow. He said, "Don't be like that." I yelled. 2 other Friday regulars who had been at the laundromat with me were within 15 feet. One was a retired EMT named Mr. Hayes, who I had said hello to for years. The other was a younger woman named Mara, who I had recognized from the post office. Mr. Hayes came across the floor fast. The man with the flashlight raised it. He swung at my left forearm with the flashlight. The flashlight was a heavy steel utility tool with a metal head, the kind security guards carry. The blow connected with the bone in my forearm. I felt the crack. Mr. Hayes tackled him. The flashlight went across the floor and hit the wall under the soap dispenser. Mara had her phone out and was already on 911. The other regular who came over, the retired postal worker I knew from years of Fridays, pinned the man's legs. KCPD arrived in 6 minutes. The dispatcher had kept Mara on the line. The man was detained on the floor of the laundromat. Mr. Hayes did not let up his weight on the suspect's shoulders until officers had him cuffed. The man's record came back to me later from the prosecutor's office. 22 prior arrests. 5 of those for prior business-targeted assaults across the Kansas City metro over the previous 2 years. He had been on a Jackson County pattern alert. He had been driving a vehicle with a license plate registered to an address in Lee's Summit. The Department of Corrections had been monitoring it as part of his supervised release from a separate 2022 conviction. He was charged with felony, aggravated assault, attempted kidnap, criminal threats, carrying a concealed weapon, and the prior pattern enhancement that the DA's office added at indictment. Jury conviction, 12 months later, 11 years state prison, 5 years supervised release after. Lifetime ban from any Kansas City metro business. GPS monitoring on release. The DA's office added the metro business ban at sentencing. The prior pattern had been across so many separate small businesses that the standard single business ban would have been functionally meaningless. I had a hairline fracture of my left ulna. 5 weeks in a cast, 9 weeks of physical therapy after, 10 months of weekly therapy plus 4 months of EMDR. I installed a home washer-dryer pair at my place that weekend. $1,800 I had been deferring. I dropped the newspaper's Friday night Metro shift beat and asked to be moved to a daytime general assignment role. The Plaza Laundromat installed a dual camera system with off-site cloud backup at my request. They hired a contracted security guard for the 8 p.m. to close hours. I sued the laundromat for negligence. The front door had not had a working camera that night. The silent alarm button at the front counter had been broken for 3 weeks, with an open ticket the chain had not addressed. The civil settlement was $50,000. During the trial, the prosecutor entered the suspect's cell phone records into evidence. He had photographed at least 16 women across Kansas City metro laundromats and convenience stores over the previous 2 years. The photos were folder sorted by location and time of day. Independence Plaza had been a folder. My photograph had been in that folder, 11 separate Fridays worth, going back 14 months. 2 of the other women in his Independence Plaza folder were also Friday night regulars, ones I had recognized by face but had never spoken to. The prosecutor's victim services office reached out to all 16 women in the weeks following his conviction. 8 of them agreed to be informed of his sentencing terms. 6 agreed to a sealed victim impact letter being placed on his file. I was one of the 6. The DA's office provided each of the 16 women a 24-hour DV nonprofit hotline number on a card with a note about which laundromat their photograph had been geotagged to. I keep my card in my wallet. I have not called the number. 3 of the other women have, per the victim services office's anonymous follow-up reporting, I do not know which 3. The victim services contact who reviewed the file with me told me, very carefully, The prosecutor's office continues to follow up on the remaining women in his folder once a year to make sure each of them is still doing okay. The check-in is a phone call, and it is voluntary. I take the call each year. The first call came 9 months after sentencing. Who I keep thinking about is Mr. Hayes. He had been doing his laundry at the plaza for 9 years. He had said hello to me for almost 4. We had never had a real conversation beyond good evening. When I yelled, once, sharply, he was across the floor in under 3 seconds. He had no obligation to come. He had every reason to stay at his own table. He had come anyway. The man who attacked me had picked a Friday night when the plaza was busy, specifically because he had calibrated for a setting that looked safe. Multiple customers, fluorescent lights, post office across the street. He had bet on the fact that no one would intervene. Mr. Hayes had broken that bet inside 3 seconds. I do not know how I would have ended that night without him.